Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Shemet. And joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler coming all the way from Israel and Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky coming all the way from New York City. It's great to see you guys, and a big shout out to our good friends at Machane Ramah in the Berkshires listening to us on 103 point, what is it?
Two.
102.3.
102.3.
102.3. And now we can truly say we're the best Torah in Dutchess County. Again, voted 10 years in a row, the best Torah program in Dutchess County. And for your Torah listening pleasure this Shabbat, we have an amazing Parsha, Parashat Balak, in which we meet some extraordinary characters, namely, one, Balak, the namesake of this parsha, the prophet for hire Bilam, his donkey, and perhaps a few other characters. So maybe just let's take the. Can you locate us in the narrative of the book of Numbers for a moment, and so discover who this is and what's going on here? Where are we, and what's bring us up to date as to what has happened in the book of Numbers, so we can talk about this parsha in its context. All right, anybody want to give that a crack?
Barry Chesler, tell us.
Barry Chesler.
Well, that's the low-hanging fruit. So we're nearing the end of the 40-year sojourn in the wilderness, and things are starting to happen. As we've commented before, Numbers is really an interesting book from a temporal point of view. The beginning of the book takes place in the first year or two, and the end of the book takes place in the 40th year. And then a few things happen in the intervening 38 years, but they're not dated very precisely. So there's kind of an air in Bamidbar of a slow summer lasting for 40 years. Things move at a very slow pace when we take into account that we're covering 40 years in the book, which isn't even 40 chapters. So the Israelites are gearing up for battle because very soon they're going to conquer the land, and they're not going to be welcomed with open arms by the natives, by the people who are passing themselves off as natives. There's going to be a war. And so in a certain sense, we could say that they're practicing on the east side of the Jordan for the big battles that are going to come when they cross over. So what we have is they're making their way north, and they're running into the other nations that are their relatives, at least in terms of the stories of Bereshit, the book of Genesis. And they're having some success on the battlefield, but they just want to get to a position where they can enter the land without really worrying about what's going on. But what's happened because of previous success on the battlefield is some of the local chieftains, such as Balak, are very concerned.
So let's identify Balak then, and tell us,
he is a king. He's the son of Tzipor, a birdman, and he's a Moabite. It's not clear that he's a Moabite, but he's certainly the Moabite king at the moment. And he looks or he hears, and this is something that has interested me for a long time, is how did these other nations on the east side of the Jordan know so much about the Israelites and what happened to them in Egypt? So Balak is concerned that the army of the Israelites is going to just march through his land and not leave much left for him. So he has very few resources, and he sends away for the mail order prophet Bilam, located further east, perhaps in Balak's hometown of Tor, and summons him so that he could curse the Israelites and give Balak a fighting chance for success.
Let me just quote the verse here. It says, "Ve'ata lechana arali." Now, come and curse for me. Eta am hazeh. Curse this nation. Ki atzumu mimeni. It's greater than I am. Ulai uchal nakebo. Maybe I will be able to conquer it or smite it. Va'agarshenu mina aretz, and I will be able to chase it away or eject it. Ki adati, because I know, Balak is saying to Bilam, et asher tivarech mivorach, whoever you bless is blessed, ve asher taor you are, and whatever you curse is cursed. Those are words that ring in the biblical ear, and I wonder, maybe either of you could comment on this, the idea of blessings and curses, or maybe I'll comment on it and you'll react, which is that in my ear, this is back to Abraham. This is, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, and that these things have remarkable power, blessings and curses, in ways that we simply do not understand or do not appreciate. Unless you've really been cursed. If you've been cursed, you can appreciate, how awful it is. Um, and, and I think maybe we still have a vestige of this, that the words are going to have power. I don't know if
Oh,
you want to give a comment to
absolutely.
that.
I totally agree with that. First of all, you point out something, and the sages, our Talmudic sages, it's their go-to maneuver for this story, which is that there's a nice parallel between Abraham and Bilam. There are a number of phrases in which that contrast is to be drawn, and this is one of the most obvious and clear ones. And it would stand to reason that when the Bible, draws an alignment between Abraham and someone else, that it's not coming out to that person's benefit. This person is the evil twin, so to speak, and it's telling us a story that God was that blesser of Abraham, and avarech mivarechecha, I'll bless those who avarecha mivarechecha, I'll bless those who bless you. Umekalelcha aor, gets in the voice of God to Abraham, and those who curse you, it doesn't use the same word, Mekalecha or here it's the asher ta'or you are, it's the same verbal pattern. Bilam has come to curse. If you know the Abraham story, you know it's going to be bad. You know it's going to be bad for him. So the story starts off for a reader of the Bible who knows it well, giving you a hint that Bilam is not likely to succeed in the cursing. But I love what you said about that sense of the power of words. I have a close friend who was also a congregant who, the specific matter is not important, which I will not mention here, but this person received a negative mention on the Tucker Carlson show at some point.
Ooh.
And received, like, you couldn't even believe what kinds of emails and personal cursing and stuff was heaped upon this person. And though I don't think that they, took it to heart, although if you did take it to heart, it'd be a whole lot worse. But even if you don't really take it to heart, and even if you don't really think that those horrible things that people are saying about you are in any way true, it cannot be good to have people say, I hope you die, and I hope you drown, and I hope
these things leave terrible residues of emotional crisis in people. They get I had a case, a person has long since passed away, but where their mother-in-law sent a letter by the executor of the mother's will, which was uh, such a poison pen letter. To After she died, she instructed her executor to send this letter to someone. It was awful, terrible. And the person came to me, what do I do with this? So I said, you should bury the letter in the mother's grave.
Yeah, nicely done.
So what I think is important to stress here is that the blessing and curses also points to the blessing and curses, and at the end of Sefer Devarim, in the book of Deuteronomy, when the Torah calls for the Israelites, now safely ensconced in the land, to assemble on two mountains and utter blessings and curses. And the blessings and curses are related to the behavior of the Israelites. Rather than cursing the Israelite people or specific tribes, the people that are cursed have misbehaved, and the people that are blessed have behaved. In a similar way, I think when we look back to Abraham, we understand, I think, in some way that the blessing and cursing in the call to Abraham is also based on people's behavior. But here, what Balak is looking for is what we might call a gratuitous curse, is that the Israelites are not really being judged for their behavior. They're being cursed for who they are. And that, I think, is ultimately untenable. And the other piece of it is that he summons Bilam as if Bilam is the person who's responsible for blessing and curses. Now, the Torah emphasizes with our prophets that the prophets are conduits of God's word, they're not the authors of God's word.
Okay, so we have to kind of remark on the fact that there is some wonderful storytelling going on here, and that the story reads, as a lovely short story, because all these characters have certain qualities to them, and there is a plot here, and the plot is, go curse the Israelites. I will pay you whatever you want, basically, and that God first appears to Bilam and says, don't do this. And here I want your reaction on what God says. He says basically, the Balak's emissaries come, they court him, and he says, "Stay with me." And they're sleeping at night, and basically Bilam gets a dream and God says to him in the dream, "Lo telechi mahem, don't go back with them. Don't go with them. Don't do what they want. Lo taor et ha'am, do not curse that people, kivaruchu, because the people is blessed." And I think it's such a remarkable passage, because it's basically saying this people has immunity. This is the Teflon people. They're blessed people. And that, of course, looking at the entire book of Numbers, that's such an odd thing for God to say in the book of Numbers. The book of Numbers has just been one catastrophe after another. And here, I want to say that it's God. There's a loving quality of God here. This is my people. This is a beautiful people. This is a blessed people. Don't you lay a finger on them. Don't you touch them. Don't you curse them. They're blessed.
Well, here's
And
my
they're never
question.
going to, whatever you say is not going to apply. And so,
No, see, that's the last thing you said counters the first thing you said in a small way. Obviously, it's basically correct, but here's what I mean. People are blessed. We love this. We love this. God is a source of blessing. But by the way, I need, Aharon and his children to place the blessing, place my name. It doesn't happen without your participation. You guys, you Kohanim, are some sort of channels, and you'll samwich me of Israel, you have to do your part. You place my name on the people, and then I'll come and bless them. Bilam seems to be portrayed as not like it's not that it's totally not going to work. Don't step on a crack and break your mother's back. That's just stupid. It's not going to happen. It's just a superstition. Bilam is not portrayed, I think, as a ineffectual, superstitious nonsense. I think he's portrayed as having some power. And so what I think I would almost, the phrase, lo ta'or am ki varuchu, clearly does mean don't curse them for they are blessed. But I would, because I think that there is a portrayal of actual charismatic power in Bilam, I would say, to translate it something like that, lo ta'or am, don't curse the people, ki baruchu, because they deserve blessing. And you're going to screw it up, and I'm going to have to intervene with you if you direct your charismatic power in the wrong way. So I don't want to say that they're blessed no matter what, because if they're blessed no matter what, Bilam can say whatever the hell he wants. Instead, God has to say, don't say your stuff, because your stuff actually does have some power. It'd just be inappropriate.
So it's a nice move. And I like it. It's a good homiletical move. They're deserving of blessing, or I wanna kind of read it almost in the plain sense, which is they have this kind of barrier. They're immune. They're immune from your curses, and whatever you do is going to be ineffectual, because anybody's curses on them is just going to be bounced off like a force field. In Star Trek. I don't know.
I want to offer a slightly different reading. And the fact is that Bilam's curses do have power that even God recognizes, which is why God tells Bilam not to curse them. If Bilam would actually curse them, God would be bound in some way by it. So there's some kind of relationship between God and Bilam, and neither of them has all the power in his hands.
Okay.
And I think it's important to recognize that. We might note in passing the passing of James Caan, and there's a little element of Sonny Corleone here as well, because when Bilam refuses Balak's offer, the messengers come back and he says that I would not take all the money in the world, which we might think is quite a magnanimous thing. Bilam is so pious, but actually he's naming his price,
Right.
right? He's saying, this is what you have to offer me to come. Just like Ephron the Hittite said, oh, what's 400 shekel between friends? Meaning you're going to pay me 400 shekel for your cave. And,
You gotta
it
make him an offer we
reminded,
can't refuse.
All right. So wait a
well,
second.
also when Salazzo comes and Sonny, he mentions the number and Sonny's eyes bulge out because he's thinking that's our money. And of course, if you watch the movie, you realize that's like about the worst thing
Okay.
you could say, as
God,
is true with Bilam.
God
Because
tells him to
Bilam had
go.
what?
God then says you can go with them. Okay.
Because I've
No,
decided, for the reason that Barry said, which was what I said also, that we agreed that he does have some power. God says, in a manner that may be a little reminiscent of Pharaoh, okay, you want to go? Go. I'm going to show you where the real power lies.
Okay. So now
right.
we're
And that
getting.
also is an echo of Abraham in chapter 18, I think it is, the Sodom and Gomorrah thing, which is in part God teaching Abraham something about the world that he lives in. So Bilam needs to be taught something too.
All right. So now I want to ask you this question, which is God just toying around with Bilam, and to what extent you would read this? Because then the very next scene is the slapstick or the most satirical scene in the whole story, which is Bilam and the donkey. God says, "Go, you go, and whatever I say, you will do." And so he goes. Vayachavosh atono. We get the nice echo of Abraham. Vayelech im sarei Moav. He goes with the officers of Moav, and fast forward, he is going, and the malach is blocking his way, and his aton his donkey stop. Ateta aton min haderech. Vayach Bilam et ha'aton. Bilam smites the animal, and lahatota hadarach. Okay, so can you give me your best explanation of what's going on here? And if is this satire? Is this comedy? Is there subtlety here? Is there something serious here? What's your take on this scene, Jeff?
All of the above. I think what the key for me, you mentioned, is God toying with Bilam. As far as I know, God only toys with one person, and that's Pharaoh. Right? I think he said the word is talalti. Um, but here, Bilam has to be taught something. And this is a way of teaching Bilam something because he thinks he's going to do God's bidding, which Bilam thinks he knows what it is. And he thinks he's going to get his money and he's going to get the pat on the back for doing right by Balak. And this is God's way of letting Bilam know in a pretty overt way that you're not who you think you are, Bilam. And I still have cards to play here that you can't do anything about. And
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, go on.
No, you go.
So the fact that it's a donkey is instructive because, as you said, it's an echo of the Akedah. And I think that, Bilam becomes very frustrated very quickly because he doesn't see. And when, we think about prophets, what is their great characteristic? It's seeing. They see better than other people. And here, Bilam, the acknowledged prophet in the ancient Near East, can't see what's in front of him.
Yeah,
And
and he turns out to be a horrible human being because he's so cruel to this animal. I mean, I think that that would be, the Torah here making him into a canard. He is,
So
yeah, go ahead.
what you're adding then is that it's not just that Bilam is not a good prophet because he doesn't see. He's also not a wise man because the donkey is wiser than he is. Look how measured the donkey's response is. And, it's really a great response. I've been your faithful servant all these years. Why are you hitting me?
Well, this is, first of all, you use the word Lahit Alel, which is actually, it appears in this one too,
In
but
this
it's what the donkey said, as what Bilam is yelling at the donkey, Hit Alal be. You're making a mockery of me, and that you're whatever, and that is exactly what's going on. I feel like what you just said now, Barry, is very much on point, that we have a character who is supposed to be a great visionary and supposed to be wise. And in fact, and even though he will say some wise things, because when the prophecy actually takes hold of him, and he gives blessing instead of the curses that he was planning on, he actually does exactly what a prophet wants. So what we want out of a prophet, God gives him a message. He says it with beauty, with poetry. It's effective. So he becomes, in fact, one hell of a great messenger. But we are expected to see him as, he is. I don't know if our listeners know this. Like, Bilam is maybe the only character, maybe not the only character in the Chumash, or maybe who actually is attested in other literatures, like other non-Israelite literature from the ancient world. He was like a well-known figure. It's like they told a story about, let's just say they told a story about Confucius or something like that. They told a story about Gautama Buddha, and it was in other cultures. And so Bilam is also in other cultures' inscriptions too. So he was known, and he was supposed to be wise, and he was supposed to be, in the Bible's terms, Yodea Dat Elyon. He knows the mind on high, but he's actually a joke. And the donkey sees what he doesn't see, and the donkey is wiser than he is in both of those senses. Now, in the end, he's going to have his eyes opened, and that's going to make him that successful charismatic when the prophecy does take hold of him. But at the moment, what I think is a really comic, like you said, slapstick or very broad comic scene, in which the guy who's supposed to be wise don't know anything, and his donkey knows more than he does. And the donkey, who, yes, it's like the Akedah, but it's also like, what's a donkey? It's stubborn, it's mulish, it doesn't, it's a pack animal, it doesn't think. It's actually even better than the person whose reputation makes him I prophet.
Okay, so I want to ask another question, which is related, I think, to the theme here in this story, which is, to what extent is this a story about how others see us? And I'll put it in that sense, which is this a story about how the how others see the Jewish people or the people of Israel, and put it in a more kind of ironic way, is this the projection of the Israelites, the Hebrews, our ancestors, as to how they think others will see us? In other words, um, are we reading in this story a way that we want to be seen by others, or that we are seen by others? There aren't many examples of Gentiles in the Torah or in the Bible, but Yitro comes to mind. Yitro is a great character. Yitro is a Gentile, not a prophet, but a real, a singularly important figure, a priest, who is he's the antithesis of Bilam, really. He's such a positive character. He's, of course, related to Moses as a father-in-law, um, and has nothing but good things to say about the people of Israel. Bilam is a bit of a rogue, and here are we projecting onto these Gentile characters a kind of um, negative stereotype? Are we saying, look, they're only they're only concerned about being carpetbagging prophets. He's only concerned about money. Balak is really the king of Moab is really I wouldn't call him a nebbish, but I would call him he's a droll character. He's really quite stupid. And is there another veiled criticism here of the way that they're trying to elicit God's attention through the creation, building 7 altars? In the end, they've built 21 altars and they've sacrificed 42, animals. I mean, what what's going on here? What's is this about how we are seen by others, or is this how we want others to see us? Take it away.
Well, no, in the question of, I mean, I think that there's a lot in this story that is about how we imagine others see us, and maybe there's a kind of a polemical or PR, so to speak, aspect to that, because this is not necessarily how the Moabites saw us. This is the Israelite account of how we telling a story about how the Moabites saw us. We don't know what the Moabites thought. They're dead. They've been dead for a long time. But the Holy Torah accounts, what we imagine that they said about us, their fear of us. But like in Judaism, in a sense, stuff hits the road when it enters the prayer book. Like the rubber hits the road when it enters the prayer book. Like you can say whatever, put it in the Talmud. Not that many people know the Talmud. You could put it in the Midrash. Not that many people know the Midrash. Lots of people know the Siddur, and that the line that begins entering the synagogue. You say, "Ma tovu alecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael." How beautiful are your tents? How good are your dwelling places? And so that comes from Bilam's speech. So when we look at ourselves, when you enter a synagogue, you're supposed to say that line. And there's a wonderful midrash about what it is, what prompted Bilam to say that. He saw that they had arranged their tents so that the entrance to one faced the wall of the other. In other words, each person's individual private dwelling maintained their privacy, and it prevented other people from sticking their nose and seeing you when you get dressed, or listening to your private matters, or whatever it is. And that prompted Bilam to say, these people are so ethical, they're so nice. So I think at some level the story is that somebody, Balak, the king, who was just frightened of our sheer numbers, and by the way, we all these thousands of years later, there's still lots of people who are afraid of us, because we're all international financiers and we run the cabal that's pulling the strings behind behind all world events and all that stuff. It's not actually true, in case anybody didn't know that. But Balak's scared of us. Bilam is predisposed to curse us. And you know what? Actually, there's such good stuff going on in our tents that even people who didn't really like us very much have to say, yeah, you got some good stuff going on.
It's so interesting, that we start our prayers with the words of how others see us, and how it's translated into something that is part of it. I mean, it's someone who's knowledgeable that comes into the service and reads those words, Matovu alecha Yaakov, or sees it inscribed, for example, on the ark. It's playing a few games with us. It's saying, this is how the world thinks they see you, and this is really how we see ourselves, as if we were looking at ourselves from the eyes of others. Barry, you want to comment on it?
Yeah, the Torah plays a lot of games like this, because we sometimes forget, as Jeremy alluded, that the story opens up with a non-Jewish misreading of who the Israelites are. Balak is scared almost to death, we could say, because he sees the Israelites as a threat, even though the Israelites themselves don't see themselves as a threat to Moab. So Bilam comes and offers this other view of the non-Jew looking at the Israelite. And what I want to suggest, and this may bear on the liturgy as well, is that a lot of what Bilam says about the Israelites is said in the present tense as if it's descriptive, but maybe is aspirational. That it would be great if the tents of Jacob were the way that Bilam describes them. And certainly when we come to daven, when we are setting our sacred space in order, that's what we're hoping to do with the sacred space. We're not describing it. I think we're hoping that as a result of our prayer and our engagement with the Almighty, that our sacred space will become as beautiful as Bilam described.
It's really it's a fascinating story. I mean, I started by thinking, is this a satire and is this a comic relief in the book of Bamidbar? But all satire has real truth to it, and the last thing you said, Barry, of course, has a tremendous ring of truth to it, and maybe this story is trying to teach us how to understand ourselves. It is a useful exercise with everybody to imagine. I was just wanted to say also, in our contemporary Jewish culture, uh, we do love when positive things are stated about us in the press, or there are lovely things, uh, and we do celebrate Jewish celebrities, and we do celebrate or are very, very grateful to people outside of the Jewish people who notice nice things about us. I mean, often, we're so often inundated with how people see us so negatively, and the anti-Semitism and the cruelty and the hatred against us. It's really remarkable when people actually love us.
But don't you
Um,
feel like, don't you feel at somewhat level like um, there's, I mean, obviously what you just said is correct. There wouldn't be the Hanukkah song if we didn't,
right.
you know, Paul Newman's half Jewish, Goldie Hawn is too, together
Put a
as
good
one
thing next to
fine-looking Jew. There wouldn't be the Hanukkah song there if it weren't for that. And we do love to know, when somebody in the NBA is Jewish, or Max Weinberg, the drummer for the legendary E Street Band. But isn't it a little bit like, you know, pathological that we have to get the affirmation from we don't usually talk like this, but the Goyish belt, like, why do I have to know that the non-Jewish world thinks we're okay? Why do I have to know that?
Yeah, I
Because
think it's a part of our insecurity, but it's also, I think it's very heartwarming to know that we are loved after all. And this is again the theme of this story, which is those who bless you will be blessed, and those who curse you will be cursed. Well, not
That's the
it's
Abraham
the
story, yeah.
intrinsic nature. I mean, that's Abraham, but are we intrinsically blessed? And isn't it great to know that some people in the world see that, and the people that see that the Jewish people are a blessed and good people are themselves the kind of people that appreciate this kind of goodness that the Jewish people offers to the world. Barry. Yeah.
so we sometimes have a tendency to see the Torah as being reductive, that we're going to reduce it to its individual parts. And I think that here in this story, especially, it's the opposite of reductive, which is a word that escapes me at the moment. And it's all these things are true at the same time. So we don't necessarily have to have non-Jews validate us, but we want them to.
Yes.
And you know, Balak could have this misunderstood view of the Israelites, and Balaam could have another view, and they're both true. It's not that one is true and the other is not, is that somehow the way the Torah presents them, they're true at the same time. And sometimes in our lives, we're going to lean more and be more interested in what Balak has to say about us. And other times, we're going to be more interested in what Bilam has to say to us. And I suspect it has to do with how we're doing ourselves.
How we see ourselves. That's right. Well, how we see ourselves. We've come to the end of another amazing edition of our Parsha Talk. We are so grateful that you have spent this time with us. Thank you so much. Thank you especially, Machane Ramah, all the people that are listening to us at Machane Ramah. We wish we could be there with you. In the meantime, though, we want to wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom. Have a really good Shabbos. Barry from Israel. Say hello to
Shabbat
everybody in
Shalom.
Israel. Jeremy in New York.
I'll say hello to everybody in
Every
New York.
single person. And here in Highland Park, New Jersey, Hello, Highland Park, New Jersey. Hello. All right, Shabbat Shalom. We'll see you next week on the next edition of Parsha Talk. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.